Hello, I'm Anni Davey. I've been telling Bible stories to children for many years, and I've got some lovely ones to tell you from the New Testament in this section here. If you want to know about the background, where I got some of the background detail from, you can look it up on the web on truthortradition.com or www.korky.info, where we've written a book called Jesus, Faith and Fact. So it's all in there somewhere, but there's some interesting things here which you may not know. You may think you do know the stories, but wait and see. So let's see what we've got. Hello, I've got another brilliant story today, one of my favourites. You might have heard it before. It's about a little man who wasn't very tall. And people were very excited in the city of Jericho. And it was a new city which King Herod had built. Beautiful marble pavements, beautiful buildings. Nobody was allowed to bring their camel in. They had to leave them in the camel park outside and park and walk. Well, camel park and walk anyway. And because camels leave a mess on the pavement, it would make a mess. And this city was beautiful. The old city of Jericho was not far away, just a big mound and old buildings and a bit smelly and horrible. But the new city was very special. And Jesus had to go through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem. So he was coming. Everybody knew that he was coming. And everybody wanted to see him. Why? Well, because he could make people better, couldn't he? And he also told them how much God loved them when the Pharisees had been telling them, oh, God doesn't like you, you're dreadful. You sinners, you're dreadful. And Jesus didn't say that to them. He just said, God loves you and he wants you to change. And that's a bit different, isn't it? So let's see what we've got here. We've got three important people standing at the gate. Well, there might have been more, but we'd say perhaps the mayor and perhaps the head leader of the synagogue. That's the place where people worship God on Saturdays, and perhaps the chief of police, but they were very important people. And the tradition was that if a visiting rabbi or important person was coming to town, they would go and have a meal with the most righteous person in town. So these three were vying with one another. Well, I know what he was doing last week and I'm much better than he is. And he'd have been saying, well, of course I'm far the best person in town. He's bound to come to my house. So they were all probably have got their servants ready at home, getting a meal ready in case Jesus should choose to come to tea with them. And there was, let's see how, everybody wanted to see Jesus, of course. So let's see how many brushes I can paint with at once. Should we try 4? Let's have a look. Because there were lots of people, not just the important people, but everybody was out. Lining the road, mums and dads, aunties and uncles, grannies and grandpas, boys and girls, and they brought their sick people too, and they would lie them down in the road outside or just in front of them in case Jesus might see them and very kindly heal them, or even just seeing him might do them good. Better give them all some heads, hadn't I? There they all are. Lots of people. Difficult to draw lots of them, isn't it? These sick people on the floor here. A bit of shadow. Actually, I could go on adding lots of crowd. If I just put the heads on, you'll know that it's meant to be people, wouldn't you? Lots of crowd in there. Hundreds and hundreds of people out in town wanting to see Jesus. And this little man here, the Bible said he wasn't very tall. His name was Zacchaeus. And actually it's a bit of a joke because Zacchaeus means pure or innocent or really righteous and good. And he was anything but. He was this word here. He was mean. Do you think he had lots of friends? No, he was probably lonely. And he collected tax for the Romans. Now the Romans had invaded the Holy Land, a bit like Russia has invaded Ukraine. And people wanted the Romans out. But the Romans wanted money from them to keep the empire going, pay their soldiers, pay the emperor, live well. So they appointed people like Zacchaeus to collect taxes. And nobody likes paying tax, but he didn't just collect the tax for the Romans. He'd have an extra little bag with a Z on it for himself, and he would take extra money from people and he would make them pay. And if they didn't pay up, he would threaten them, like saying, well, if you don't pay me, I might have to take one of your children and sell them into slavery to get the extra money. You're going to find that extra 10 shekels for me or not? And they would somehow manage to find it, hopefully. So he wasn't popular. In fact, he was hated, and he knew it. So he didn't really dare to go out in the crowd with all the people, because somebody might quite easily have knifed him and nobody would have said a word. They'd all have been glad to see the back of him. So he thought, I know what I'll do. I can't see over them anyway because I'm not very tall. I'm going to climb that tree. So he climbed up the tree. It was called a sycamore fig tree. There were lots of palm trees around because Jericho was called the city of palms. But this little fig tree was outside, and he thought, if I climb up in there, I can sort of hide in the branches and nobody will see me, and I'd get a good view of Jesus coming. So then there began to be a buzz of excitement in the crowd, and he knew that this person was coming. And he was so excited he nearly fell out of the tree. But he was very worried because Jesus didn't go up to the important people at the gate. Jesus came up to the tree where he was sitting, and he looked up in the tree and said, Zacchaeus? Zacchaeus thought, oh dear, there's nobody else up here called Zacchaeus. He'd better go down. Jesus said, come on, down you come. I think Zacchaeus must have thought he was in for the telling off of his life, for his horrible lifestyle and what he'd been doing, because he knew that Jesus knew. So he stood in front of him, waiting for the awful telling off. And it didn't come. And when he looked up, Jesus was smiling at him. Amazing. Imagine Jesus smiling at you when you knew you were horrible. And Jesus said to him, Zacchaeus, go home and get something ready. I'm coming to your house for a meal today. What? My house? You're coming to me? Yes, said Jesus. Oh. And Zacchaeus went shooting off home as fast as his little legs could carry him, and all the crowd were really angry. They probably ground their teeth, which makes a horrible squeaky noise. That's what they did in the Middle East. They may still do, I don't know. They hadn't got nice dentists like we have. And they were very angry. Surely Jesus must know that that's the worst sinner in town. He's the very last person he should have to deal with. There's plenty of other more righteous people. Well, I'm more righteous than Zacchaeus. But Jesus went to Zacchaeus' house and had a meal with him. And if a rabbi had a meal with you, that meant that you were righteous, that Zacchaeus was living up to his name of Mr. Good, Mr. Righteous. And something must have been said at that meal, because Zacchaeus came out of the house after the meal and said to the crowd who were waiting outside, he was this word here. Shall we read it together? He said, I'm very, very sorry about the way I've been behaving. And that really is difficult sometimes to say, isn't it? To say sorry and really mean it. And Zacchaeus knew that in the old scriptures, it said in the book of Leviticus in chapter 6, that if you are really sorry, you have to prove it. You have to give back, I think it's 4 times as much as you've stolen, and you have to make extra gifts on top. So Zacchaeus said to everybody, listen, I'm going to pay you back 4 times what I've taken extra, and I'm going to give away half my stuff to the poor, and I'm going to start now. And Jesus said, today salvation has come to this house. Zacchaeus was showing himself to be a true child of God because he'd said sorry. And so Jesus told him that he was this word here, he was he was forgiven. He became a new man. It was absolutely incredible. I don't know if he went on being a tax collector, but if he had, he would have been an honest one. So that's what I've got put up here. And I found that this is true. With Jesus as my friend, which is what I asked him to be over 60 years ago now, and all this time I know that it makes such a difference. Such a difference. I know that I don't get things right even after all this time. And sometimes I think things that I know are wrong. Or I say things I wish I hadn't said that. Or I do something I think, that probably wasn't the right thing to do. But if I tell Jesus about it and I'm really sorry, I know that he'll give me a fresh start and he'll help me. Sometimes when I'm happy, it's brilliant. I can talk to him about that. And when I'm sad or when things are going wrong or when I'm not well, I can always talk to him about it. And he always, always helps. So he gave Zacchaeus a completely new life. And he said that's what he came to do. In Luke chapter 19, verse 10, it says, Jesus came to look for and to save people who are lost. He didn't come for the good ones. He came for people who are like us, who get things wrong. Isn't that a brilliant story?